Danny Cole had never wanted to leave Earth. He was an engineer, not an explorer. He liked fixing things, building things, and solving problems with his hands. But when the Earth Space Fleet needed people for the most important mission in human history, they did not ask for volunteers. They just sent orders. So Danny found himself aboard the Starboard Hope, humanity's newest and biggest ship, traveling to a place no human had ever been before. They were going to meet the Cathari. The Cathari were the most powerful species in the known galaxy. They had built an empire that stretched across 1,000 star systems. They had conquered dozens of other species. They were warriors, and they respected only one thing: strength. For a long time, the Cathari had ignored humanity. Humans were too small, too weak, and too far away to matter. But then something changed. A fleet of space raiders had attacked Earth's outer colonies, and humanity had fought back. Against all odds, the small human fleet had won. They had destroyed the raiders completely. The Cathari had noticed that now, for the first time ever, they had invited humans to their home world. They wanted to see these strange creatures who had won a battle they should have lost. They wanted to know if humans were worthy of respect. Captain Lara Webb led the human delegation. She was tall and calm, with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had spent 30 years in space, and nothing surprised her anymore. She had chosen Danny for the mission because he was the best engineer in the fleet. She did not know that this choice would change the fate of two species. The Starboard Hope arrived at Kethra Prime on a Tuesday. Danny watched through the window as the planet grew larger. It was a dark world, covered in black mountains and red forests. Everything about it looked dangerous. The landing was smooth. The airlock opened, and Danny got his first look at the Cathari. They were terrifying. Each one stood over 8 feet tall. Their bodies were covered in hard black plates, like armor made of bone. They had 4 arms, each one ending in claws that could cut through metal. Their eyes glowed like hot copper, and when they spoke, their voices sounded like rocks grinding together. Danny tried not to stare. He tried not to run. He reminded himself that he was representing all of humanity, and running would be bad for diplomacy. The Cathari led them through a massive city made of black stone. Everything was huge. The doors were 20 feet tall. The stairs were built for giants. Danny felt like an ant walking through a world made for something much bigger and much more dangerous. Finally, they reached the grand banquet hall. Danny had never seen anything like it. The room was bigger than a football stadium. Thousands of aliens sat at long tables, eating and drinking and talking in languages Danny could not understand. The ceiling was so high that clouds had formed near the top. At the far end of the room, a throne sat on a raised platform, and on that throne sat the Emperor of the Cathari. Captain Webb gathered her team. "Stay together," she ordered. "Do not wander off. Do not touch anything. Do not sit anywhere unless I tell you to sit. Understood?" Everyone nodded. Then the crowd pushed forward, and Danny lost sight of his captain. He tried to follow her, but there were too many aliens. They were all bigger than him, and they did not seem to notice the small human trying to push through. Danny was shoved left, then right, then left again. Within minutes, he had no idea where he was. His translator earpiece made a crackling sound, and then went silent. Great. Now he could not even understand what anyone was saying. Danny looked around desperately. He saw a holographic display floating in the air, showing what looked like a seating chart. But the symbols made no sense to him. They were just strange shapes and colors. A massive Cathar steward appeared in front of Danny. The alien pointed at an empty seat at an elevated table near the throne. The steward made angry gestures, clearly telling Danny to sit down and stop blocking the way. Danny was tired. He was lost. He was scared. And the steward looked like it might pick him up and throw him if he did not move. So Danny sat down, the entire hall went silent. Every conversation stopped. Every alien turned to look at him. Thousands of glowing eyes fixed on the small human sitting at the elevated table. Danny felt his stomach drop. Something was very, very wrong. Some of the HFY drew weapons. Others fell to their knees. A few made sounds that might have been gasps of shock. The steward who had pointed Danny to the seat looked like it wanted to die of embarrassment. Then Danny heard heavy footsteps approaching. He looked up and saw her. Princess Vexara, daughter of the Emperor, walked toward him. She was the tallest HFY Danny had seen, standing nearly 9 feet tall. Her black armor was covered in scars from old battles. Her eyes burned brighter than the others, and her presence made the air feel heavy. She stopped in front of Danny and looked down at him. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she spoke. Danny's translator flickered back to life just in time to catch her words. "You have sat in the challenge seat, little creature. Do you know what this means?" Danny shook his head. He could barely breathe. "It means you have declared yourself my suitor," the princess said. "You have challenged every other warrior in this hall for the right to claim my hand. By our ancient law, you must now compete in the trials of claiming. If you refuse, your species will be seen as cowards. If you fail, you will die." Danny stared at her. His mind was completely blank. "So tell me, human," Princess Vexara continued. "Are you very brave, or are you very stupid?" Danny thought about the question. He thought about the fact that he had just accidentally proposed to an alien princess who could kill him with one finger. He thought about how his only crime was sitting in the wrong chair because he could not read a seating chart. "Can I be both?" he asked. Princess Vexara made a sound that might have been a laugh. Or it might have been a growl. Danny could not tell. "We shall see," she said. "The trials begin tomorrow. Try not to die too quickly, little creature. It would be boring." She turned and walked away, leaving Danny alone at the table, surrounded by thousands of aliens, who were either going to watch him compete for a princess or watch him die trying. Somewhere in the crowd, Captain Webb was going to be very, very angry. Danny put his head in his hands and wondered how his life had gone so wrong so fast. Captain Webb did not yell. That was somehow worse than yelling. She just stood there in the human quarters, staring at Danny with eyes that could have frozen fire. "You sat in the challenge seat," she said. Her voice was flat and cold. "I did not know what it was," Danny said. The steward pointed at it. "My translator was broken. I thought I was just supposed to sit down. And now you are engaged to the deadliest warrior in the HFY Empire." That does seem to be the situation. Yes. Ambassador Kim Ortega paced back and forth across the room. She was a small woman with dark hair and worried eyes. Her job was to make sure humanity looked good to the aliens. Right now, she looked like she wanted to throw Danny out an airlock. "We cannot withdraw," she said. "If Danny backs out now, the HFY will think all humans are cowards. They will lose all respect for us. Everything we have worked for will be destroyed. So what do we do?" Captain Webb asked. "Danny has to compete in the trials." Everyone looked at Danny. He was sitting on a chair that was too big for him, in a room that was too big for him, on a planet where everything wanted to kill him. He had never felt smaller in his life. "What exactly are these trials?" he asked. Ambassador Ortega pulled up a holographic display. "The trials of claiming are ancient HFY tradition. Any warrior who wants to marry a princess must complete 7 challenges. The challenges test strength, courage, wisdom, and worthiness. And how many people usually survive these trials?" Ortega paused. "The survival rate is not high." "How not high?" "About 12%. Danny closed his eyes. 12%. He had an 88% chance of dying. Those were terrible odds for an engineer who had never been in a real fight. The first trial is tomorrow, Ortega continued. It is called the Hunt. You will be dropped on a moon with dangerous animals. You must survive for 3 days and bring back a kill. The hunter with the largest kill wins the first trial. What kind of animals? Very large ones. With many teeth. Danny nodded slowly. His mind was already working, doing what it always did when he faced a problem. He was an engineer. He solved problems. Maybe he could not beat the Cathari at their own game, but maybe he did not have to. Maybe he could change the rules. I need information, he said. Everything you have about the moon. The ecosystem. The animals. The terrain. Everything. Ortega looked surprised. Why? Because I am not going to win this by being stronger than them. But I might win it by being smarter. The next morning, Danny was loaded onto a small ship with 15 other suitors. They were all Cathari warriors, each one bigger and stronger than the last. They carried ceremonial weapons and wore armor decorated with the trophies of past victories. They looked at Danny like he was a joke. One of them, a massive warrior named Krathox, leaned down to speak to Danny. Little human, he said, do yourself a favor. Die quickly in the trial. It will be less painful than what comes after. Danny looked up at him. Thanks for the advice. The ship landed on a gray moon covered in rocky hills and dark forests. The air was cold and thin. In the distance, Danny could hear something roaring. Each hunter was given a single knife and dropped at a different location. Danny found himself alone in a valley filled with strange plants and stranger sounds. Most of the Cathari hunters immediately set off to find prey. They were warriors. They knew how to track and kill. They trusted their strength to carry them through. Danny did not move. Instead, he sat down and studied his surroundings. He had spent the entire night reading everything he could about this moon. He knew that the largest predator was a creature called a stone maw, a beast the size of an elephant with skin like rock and teeth like swords. He also knew that stone maws were attracted to the smell of blood and heat. Danny could not fight a stone maw, but he did not need to fight it. He needed to catch it. Over the next 2 days, Danny built a trap. He found a narrow canyon where a stone maw would have trouble moving. He used the local plants to create a rope strong enough to hold the beast. He dug pits and covered them with thin layers of rock. He found a hot spring and figured out how to redirect its heat to attract the creature. On the 3rd day, Danny cut his hand and let the blood drip into the wind. Then he waited. The stone maw came just before sunset. It was even bigger than Danny had imagined. A mountain of muscle and stone moving through the canyon toward the smell of blood and warmth. It did not see the traps. It did not expect the trap. Nothing had ever been clever enough to trap it before. The first pit made it stumble. The rope caught its legs. The second pit brought it down. And Danny, moving faster than he had ever moved, drove his knife into the one soft spot on the creature's body, the gap between its skull and its neck. The stone maw died. Danny stood over its body, breathing hard, covered in alien blood. He had done it. He had killed the most dangerous predator on the moon. When the ships came to collect the hunters, the Cathari could not believe what they saw. The small human had brought down a stone maw, something that most Cathari warriors never even attempted. His kill was 3 times larger than any other hunter's. Lord Krathox stared at Danny with new eyes. How? He demanded. How did you do this? Danny shrugged. I thought about it. Up in orbit, Princess Vexara watched the results come in. She had expected the human to die. Everyone had expected the human to die. Instead, he had won the first trial without ever fighting a fair battle, for the first time in many years. The princess felt something she had almost forgotten. She felt curious. Interesting, she said to herself. Very interesting. The second trial was called the Duel of Wills. It was a mental challenge where each suitor had to relive their most painful memories while the entire court watched. The Kethari believed that true warriors could face any pain, including the pain of their own past. The Kethari suitors showed memories of glorious battles, of wounds received in combat, of physical suffering that would have killed lesser beings. The audience watched with respect. Then it was Danny's turn. His memories were different. He showed the night his parents died in a car accident when he was 12 years old. He showed the years of loneliness that followed, growing up in foster homes, never feeling like he belonged anywhere. He showed the struggle of working 2 jobs while going to school, the exhaustion, the doubt, the fear that he would never be good enough. The Kethari did not understand at first. Where was the battle? Where was the physical pain? But as they watched, something changed. They saw a child facing grief alone. They saw a young man refusing to give up even when everything was against him. They saw a kind of strength they had never considered before, the strength to keep going. When the body is fine but the heart is broken. When the memory ended, the hall was silent. Princess Vexara stared at the small human standing in the center of the room. He was not crying. He was not ashamed. He had shown his deepest wounds to thousands of strangers, and he was still standing. She had killed her first enemy at age 6. She had led armies by the time she was 12. But she had never faced anything like what this human had survived. For the first time in her life, Princess Vexora wanted to know more about someone, and that scared her more than any battle ever had. The final trial was called the bonding ceremony. It was not a test of strength or courage or wisdom. It was simply the moment when the princess chose her suitor. For 1,000 years, the choice had been obvious. The princess always picked the strongest warrior, the deadliest fighter, the most powerful champion. That was the Kethari way. That was how their empire had grown from 1 world to 1,000. But this ceremony would be different. Danny stood in the grand hall where everything had started. The same hall where he had sat in the wrong seat and changed his life forever. The same hall where thousands of aliens had watched him with curious eyes, wondering if he would survive the night. Now those aliens were watching again. The emperor sat on his throne, ancient and massive, his copper eyes fixed on the small human standing among the suitors. Counselors and generals and nobles filled the viewing platforms, all waiting to see what would happen. The remaining suitors knelt before the princess. There were only 5 left. 3 of them were Kethari warriors who had survived the trials through brute force. 1 was an alien from another species, a champion sent by his people to form an alliance. And then there was Danny, the engineer who had stumbled into all of this by accident. Princess Vexara walked down from the royal platform. She moved slowly, letting the moment build. Every eye in the hall followed her. She stopped in front of the suitors and looked at each one in turn. The warriors met her gaze with pride. The alien champion looked nervous. Danny just looked tired. "I have watched each of you throughout the trials," Vexara said. Her voice carried through the hall, clear and strong. "I have seen your strengths and your weaknesses. I have judged your worth." She paused. The hall was silent. For 1,000 years, my ancestors chose their mates based on one thing: the ability to destroy. We valued strength above all else. We conquered the galaxy because we were the deadliest species alive. The crowd nodded. This was their history. This was their pride. "But I have learned something during these trials," Vexara continued. "I have learned that there are other kinds of strength. Kinds that we have forgotten. Kinds that we have ignored." She turned to face Danny directly. This human defeated a stone maul without ever raising his weapon. He showed his deepest wounds to strangers and did not break. He defeated Lord Krathox, one of our greatest warriors, and then he offered mercy instead of death. The crowd began to murmur. Some looked angry. Others looked confused. The Kethari Empire is powerful, Vexara said. But we are also alone. Every species in the galaxy fears us. Every planet we have conquered dreams of the day they can destroy us. We have won 1,000 victories, but we have not made a single friend. She gestured toward Danny. Humans are different. They are weak compared to us. They are small. They do not have our strength or our armor or our weapons. But they have something we do not have. They know how to build instead of just destroy. They know how to connect instead of just conquer. They know how to show mercy without feeling weak. Vexara's voice grew stronger. I do not choose a suitor based on who can kill the most enemies. I choose based on who can help my empire survive the next 1,000 years. And the answer to that question is not the strongest warrior in this hall. She extended her hand toward Danny. I choose the human. The hall exploded into chaos. Counselors shouted protests. Warriors demanded explanations. The other suitors rose to their feet, some angry, some stunned. The emperor raised one massive hand, and silence fell like a hammer. Explain your choice, daughter, he commanded. His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. Vexara did not look away from her father. Our empire is dying, father. We do not see it because the death is slow. But every year, we have fewer allies and more enemies. Every decade, the species we conquered grows stronger while we grow weaker. We are powerful, but power alone cannot save us. She pointed at Danny. The humans defeated a raider fleet with ships that were smaller and weaker than their enemies. They did it through creativity and cooperation. They did it because they were willing to think differently. Danny stood up. His legs were shaking, but his voice was steady. I did not plan any of this, he said. I sat in the wrong seat because I could not read a seating chart. I competed in the trials because I had no choice. I did not come here to marry a princess or change an empire. He looked at the emperor. But I have learned something about your people. You are not monsters. You are warriors trapped in a system that does not let you be anything else. You have forgotten how to make friends because you have spent so long making enemies. Danny took a step forward. Humanity is not here to conquer you. We are not here to be conquered. We are here because we believe that the galaxy is big enough for everyone. We are looking for allies, partners, maybe even family. He turned to Vexara. If you will have us. The emperor was silent for a long time. His ancient eyes moved from Danny to Vexara and back again. Everyone in the hall held their breath, waiting for judgment. Then, slowly, the emperor began to laugh. It was a deep sound, like thunder rolling across mountains. It shook the walls and rattled the floor. The crowd did not know what to make of it. My daughter has found a mate who challenges her mind as well as her strength, the emperor said at last. This is unexpected. This is strange. But perhaps strange is what we need. He rose from his throne, all 12 feet of him, and looked down at Danny. The Dominion of Kethara accepts humanity as our allies, and I accept you, Danny Cole, as my future son. Danny let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. Beside him, Vexara's mandibles curved into something that looked almost like a smile. You realize you are now royalty, she said quietly. I am still just an engineer. Good. My empire could use one. The ceremony ended with Danny and Vexara standing together before the throne. The crowd slowly accepted what they had witnessed. Some were happy, some were angry. Most were simply confused, but confusion was not a bad thing. Confusion meant they were thinking differently. And thinking differently was the first step toward real change. 6 months later, Danny stood on the observation deck of the Starboard Hope. Through the window, he could see a fleet of ships performing training exercises. Half of them were human. Half of them were Kethari. They moved together in perfect formation, two species learning to trust each other. Vexara stood beside him. still towering over him by several feet. She had changed in the last 6 months. She smiled more. She laughed more. She was learning that strength did not always mean fighting. "My people are calling you the seat stealer," she said. "They are turning your story into a legend." Danny grinned. "I'd prefer accidental diplomat. That is less impressive, but more accurate." Bashar made the sound that Danny had learned was Cathari laughter. "Perhaps, but legends are important. They show my people that change is possible, that there are other ways to be strong." Danny leaned against her armored side. It was comfortable now. He had gotten used to her height, her strength, her alien nature. She was still terrifying, but she was also his wife. His partner, his friend. "What happens next?" he asked. "I do not know," Vexara admitted. "But for the first time in my life, I am not afraid of the answer." They watched the fleet together as it sailed toward the stars. Two species, once strangers, now bound together by an accident and a choice. It had started with the wrong seat at a banquet. It had ended with hope for the entire galaxy. And Danny Cole, engineer, accidental diplomat, and seat stealer, would not have had it any other way. The trials continued, but Danny barely had time to rest between them. He won some. He lost others. But somehow, against all odds, he was still alive. He had made it further than anyone expected. The other suitors were starting to take him seriously, and that made him more dangerous than any weapon. But it was not the trials that changed everything. It was what happened between them. 3 days after the duel of wills, Danny was alone in the human quarters, studying data for the next challenge. His eyes were tired. His body ached. He had not slept properly in a week. Every night, he dreamed of dying in new and creative ways. Then he heard heavy footsteps in the hallway. The door opened, and Princess Vexara walked in. Danny jumped to his feet. He looked around for help, but there was no one else in the room. He was alone with the deadliest warrior in 3 sectors, and he had no idea why she was there. "Your guards," he said. "Where are your guards?" "I sent them away," she replied. Her voice was different than before, softer, almost uncertain. "I wanted to speak with you alone." Danny swallowed. "Am I in trouble?" "Perhaps. Perhaps not. I have not decided yet." She walked around the room, looking at the human furniture, the human technology, the human food sitting on the table. Everything was so small compared to what she was used to. It was like visiting a world made for children. "How did you survive the hunt?" she asked finally. "Tell me the truth." Danny hesitated. Then he decided that lying to someone who could break him in half was probably a bad idea. "I built a trap," he said. "I studied the moon before the trial. I learned about the animals, the terrain, the weather. I found a weakness in the stone maw, and I used it." "You did not fight it." "Not really. I let the trap do most of the work." Vexar turned to look at him. Her copper eyes were unreadable. "My people would call that cowardice. A true warrior faces his enemy directly. Your people would be dead if they tried to face a stone maw directly. At least most of them would. I am not a warrior, princess. I am an engineer. I solve problems. I find ways to make hard things easier." "And you do not see this as weakness?" Danny thought about the question. It was a good question, and he wanted to give a good answer. "Strength is not just about muscles," he said. "It is about using what you have to get what you need. I do not have claws or armor, but I have a brain. That is my weapon." Vexara was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something that surprised Danny completely. She sat down. The furniture was too small for her. She looked uncomfortable and awkward, her long legs folded beneath her, her 4 arms held close to her body. But she sat down anyway, bringing herself closer to Danny's level. "My father chose me to be a weapon," she said. From the day I was born, I was trained to fight, to kill, to conquer. I have never known anything else. I have never been allowed to know anything else. Danny sat down across from her. That sounds lonely. I did not know it was lonely until I watched your memories. I saw your pain, your loss, your struggle. And I saw something I've never seen before. I saw someone who kept going, even when there was no battle to win. Someone who found strength in things other than war. She looked at her hands, those powerful hands that had killed hundreds. I do not know how to do that. I do not know how to be anything except what I was made to be. Danny felt something shift in his chest. He had been so afraid of this creature, this alien princess who could end his life without even trying. But sitting here, in this too small room, she did not look like a monster. She looked like someone who had never been given a choice. "Can I show you something?" he asked. Vexara nodded. Danny pulled out his personal device and opened his photo collection. He showed her pictures from Earth, green forests and blue oceans, cities filled with lights and life, children playing in parks, families eating dinner together, musicians performing on street corners, artists painting pictures of the sunset. "This is my world," he said. "We are not warriors like your people. We fight when we have to, but that is not what we live for. We live for these moments, for connection, for beauty, for love." Vexara studied the images. Her eyes moved slowly from one to the next, taking in every detail. "Your world is soft," she said. "Yes," Danny agreed. "But that softness is not weakness. We protect our softness because it is valuable. It is what makes life worth living. My people do not have this. We have victory. We have conquest. We have honor. But we do not have—" She paused, searching for the right word. "Peace. Maybe that is why you are so powerful," Danny said. "And maybe that is why you are so alone." Vexara looked at him sharply. For a moment, Danny thought he had gone too far. Then her expression changed. The hardness left her eyes, replaced by something almost fragile. "You are wise, little human. Wiser than any of my other suitors. I am just an engineer who reads a lot. No, you are more than that. I am beginning to understand why you survived the trials when you should have died." They talked for hours after that. Danny learned about Vexira's life, the endless training, the first kill at age 6, the army she had commanded before she was old enough to understand what death really meant. He learned that she had never had a friend, only soldiers who followed her and enemies who feared her. Vexara learned about humanity, their music, their art, their strange habit of cooperating with each other instead of competing. She learned about democracy and kindness and mercy. She learned that there were other ways to be strong. When she finally left, the sun was rising over the alien city. Danny walked her to the door, suddenly aware of how much smaller he was than her. "Thank you," Vexara said, "for showing me those pictures, for talking to me like I am a person and not a weapon." "You are a person," Danny said, "no matter what anyone else says." She made that strange sound again, the one that might have been a laugh. "You are strange, Danny Cole, but I think I like strange." She left without another word. Danny closed the door and leaned against it, his heart beating fast. Somewhere along the way, he had stopped being afraid of the princess. That probably should have worried him. But instead, it made him feel something he had not felt in a very long time. It made him feel hope. But hope was dangerous. Lord Krathox had been watching the princess's visits to the human quarters. He had seen the way she looked at Danny during the trials. He had seen her interest growing into something more. And he was not going to let a tiny human take what he had spent decades waiting for. The next morning, Danny received a message. Lord Krathox was challenging him to a private duel. No rules, no referees. Just 2 fighters and 1 survivor. If Danny refused, He would be seen as a coward. If Danny accepted, he would almost certainly die. Danny looked at the message for a long time. Then he began to build something new. The arena was old. It sat outside the capital city, half buried in red sand and black rock. The Cathari had stopped using it centuries ago when they built bigger, better places to watch warriors kill each other. Now, it was forgotten by most, remembered only by those who wanted to settle disputes without the rules of formal combat. Danny stood in the center of the arena, looking up at the ancient walls. They were cracked and broken, but they were still tall. Whatever happened here tonight, no one outside would see it. No one outside would help him. Lord Krathox stood on the other side of the arena. He was even bigger than Danny remembered, nearly 10 feet of muscle and armor. His ceremonial blades gleamed in the fading light, passed down through 20 generations of warriors. He had killed more enemies than Danny had met people. The crowd was small but important. A few dozen Cathari had come to watch, all of them supporters of Lord Krathox. They wanted to see the human die. They wanted the natural order restored. Princess Vexara was not there. Danny had made sure of that. He had not told her about the duel. She would have tried to stop it, and that would have made things worse. This was something he had to do alone. "You came," Lord Krathox said. His voice echoed off the ancient stones. "I thought you might run." "I thought about it," Danny admitted. "Running seemed smart, but I have learned that smart is not always enough. Then you have learned to die with honor. That is something." Lord Krathox raised his blades and gave Danny the traditional Cathari salute. It was a gesture of respect between warriors, a sign that they were equals in battle. Danny knew he was not equal to this creature, but he accepted the gesture anyway. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. "What is that?" Krathox asked. "Something I built. A weapon?" "More or less." Lord Krathox laughed. It was a deep, rumbling sound that shook the air. "You think some tiny machine can save you, little human? I have fought enemies with weapons that could destroy planets. You cannot hurt me with your toys." Danny did not answer. He just held the device in his hand and waited. Krathox charged. He moved faster than anything that Psi should be able to move. His blades cut through the air, aimed at Danny's head and chest. This was the attack that had killed 100 warriors. The strike that no one had ever survived. Danny pressed the button on his device. The sonic emitter activated. It was a simple piece of engineering, really. Danny had spent 3 nights studying Cathari biology, learning about their nervous system, their weaknesses, their pain centers. He had discovered that Cathari nerve clusters vibrated at a very specific frequency. If you hit that frequency with the right kind of sound wave, the nerves would overload. It would not kill them. Danny was not a killer, but it would hurt them more than anything they had ever felt before. Lord Krathox screamed. His blades fell from his hands. His legs gave out beneath him. He collapsed to the ground, his entire body shaking as invisible waves of pain tore through his nervous system. The crowd gasped. Some of them stepped forward, ready to interfere. But this was a formal duel. No one was allowed to help once the fight had begun. Danny walked toward the fallen warrior. He picked up one of the dropped blades. It was heavy in his hands, designed for someone much stronger than him. But it was sharp, and that was all that mattered. He stood over Lord Krathox and held the blade to his throat. The crowd was silent. Danny could feel their eyes on him, waiting to see what he would do. In Cathari culture, this was the moment of truth. The winner of a duel had 2 choices: kill or humiliate. There was no third option, but Danny was not Cathari. "Do you yield?" he asked. Lord Krathox stared up at him. The pain was still there, still burning through his body, but his eyes were clear. He understood what Danny was offering. It was something no Cathari had ever offered before, a chance to surrender without shame. "You could kill me," Krathox said. "You have the right. I know. Why do you not take it?" Danny thought about the question. He thought about everything he had learned since coming to this world. He thought about Vexara and her stories of endless killing. He thought about his parents, who had taught him that violence was the last resort, not the first. "Because I am not here to prove that I am stronger than you," Danny said. "I am here to prove that humans are different. We do not need to kill everyone who stands in our way. We can find another path." He lowered the blade and stepped back. "I yield," Lord Krathox said. The words came out slowly, like they were being torn from somewhere deep inside him. "I yield to the human." Danny reached down and offered his hand. For a long moment, Krathox just stared at it. In his entire life, no one had ever offered to help him up after a defeat. Defeated enemies were killed or left to suffer. They were not given respect. Slowly, Krathox took Danny's hand and allowed himself to be pulled to his feet. The crowd did not know what to do. Some of them looked angry. Others looked confused. But a few of them, just a few, looked at Danny with something new in their eyes. It might have been respect. "You fight strangely, human," Krathox said. "I am an engineer. We solve problems in strange ways. You solved the problem of me. I solved the problem of the duel. You are not a problem. You are a warrior who wanted something badly. I understand that." Krathox was silent for a moment. Then he did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He bowed his head. "I was wrong about you, Danny Cole. You are not weak. You are strong in ways I did not know existed." Word of the duel spread quickly. By the next morning, everyone on Kethra Prime knew what had happened. The human had defeated Lord Krathox, the greatest warrior of his generation. And then he had shown mercy. Princess Vexara heard the news while preparing for the day's trials. Her servants told her how Danny had refused to kill, how he had offered his hand to his fallen enemy, how he had won without becoming a killer. She stood very still for a long time. Then she made a decision. It was a decision that would change the course of her empire. A decision that would change the course of her life. The final trial was coming. And when it came, Princess Vexara knew exactly what she was going to do. She was going to choose the human. Not because he was the strongest. Not because he was the deadliest. But because he was the first suitor in 1,000 years who had shown her that strength could wear many faces. And maybe, just maybe, one of those faces was mercy.